Okay. I'm hearing it's quieting down a little bit. I didn't know if I was going to be introduced or if I was just going to start us off. I've got the mic, so we'll get cracking. Okay, so these questions have lovingly come in from all of you today. There are quite a few, so I apologise if I don't get to yours. I'm intending to keep it varied, and I'm hoping it will be a wonderful conversation between our two fabulous keynote speakers. I'd also like to take a quick moment to say thank you to you all for staying to the end. It's lovely to see all of your faces. Let's get started. Okay, let's start with a simple one. What other topologies and techniques and approaches work well with TT?
Well, so the things we've seen already that we know work really well are Wardley mapping and domain-driven design. We saw that from, well, several talks today, but including Susanne's talk. I mean, my mind was kind of blown when I first saw your talk, or I can't remember which I saw first, your talk or your slides. I was like, this is just incredible, and it made a lot of sense. It actually helped your stuff, Susanne, helped me to understand how Wardley Maps actually works, and it helped me to think about domain-driven design as well. So I actually kind of learned more about those two things from your work than directly. What else do we know? Well, all the awareness on socio-technical systems fits pretty well, because we are super inspired. You'll find the references at the end of the Team Topologies book. There's a long list of material that we read and referenced in the Team Topologies book. So lots of stuff around socio-technical systems. A good chunk of the stuff around value streams. So for those of you at the workshop, Steve's workshop this lunchtime, will have gained some insight, I hope, into that, because this is about flow ultimately. That's our main architectural kind of clue or heuristic or principle. But really, any other approaches that see the organization as a living thing rather than a machine. Because too often, historically, particularly with Taylorist approaches and the kind of post-1950s management approach, we're trying to build a complicated machine here, and we need to optimize it and make the parts work harder and sweat the assets and all the rest of that nonsense. And so anything in that space which tries to see this whole activity as like a machine is not going to work well with this kind of flow-based socio-technical approaches like team topologies. But anything that does start to see the organization as something more like an ecosystem, where we have to nudge it and we have to set up the kind of constraints in a good way, anything like that is likely to work well, I think.
Anything to add, Susanne?
Yeah, I would also, maybe I'm a little biased, but also I see it very complementing well with Wardley mapping. So Wardley mapping also comes with the different one of the climatic patterns says think aptitude and attitude. So, and that when you organize your teams, it's not all about your skill set, but also your personal preferences. If you like more, if you're happy with exploring and discovering, or if you are more improving and stabilizing or maturing and optimizing. And so Simon Wardley has introduced the pioneers, settlers, and town planners. He now has rephrased them into explorers, villagers, and town planners. And I guess some of the ideas aspect are very, working very well together with the team types. Like, for example, like platform teams can be on the one side more on the settlers and town planners attitude, but on the other side it complements it, because it's not only that you're just in one team being settlers or only town planners, but you can also switch your context depending, like if you, for example, discover new technologies, then you're going also in the exploration mode, and that's where you can also explore with others. So I guess those both are complementing each other very well.
Great, thank you. Now, this question has come in many forms, so I'm just going to read the first one. Team topologies is a framework some members of the audience are currently using, but there has been variable success with getting people in the frame of mind. Is that the ultimate crux of the issue, or can anything be done to achieve it sooner?
Did I get the question right?
What's the crux? The difficulty getting people in the right frame of mind?
Yes, the frame of mind.
Do you want to answer it first?
I don't understand this question.
So I guess it's fair to say one of the so someone, and I can't remember who, said online maybe like 2 years ago that their comment was, I think that Matthew and Manuel don't realise what they've done. And what we basically did in retrospect is to drop a huge rock in the middle of the pool. We thought we were dropping a pebble, but it's a massive rock and so lots of waves. And the waves are due to the fact that this approach is not only about flow, which is very different to the operating principles of most organizations until recently, but also it's about, we're actually suggesting that we think about humans. My God, think about the human beings in an organization. Can't do that. So there's a lot of real challenges here for the traditional ways of management. And it does need like it is a big mindset change. So I guess for me, my mindset has been changing towards this approach very gradually since me personally, probably about 2011. So it's a long time. Whereas people are coming to this new, they're like, this makes no sense. Like, how can we possibly do that? It makes no sense to give these teams autonomy or to think about flow or blah, blah, blah. And so, yeah, I would say the helping people to see the value of a different way of, organizing things and interacting. Yeah, it's certainly a big. I don't know whether it is the crux of the challenge, but it's certainly a big thing there, because some folks really get it and it makes an awful lot of sense. Other people, it seems almost alien. So sometimes we need to start with the expectation that people will find this stuff really, really weird, far more weird than we ever would expect, and meet them where they are, and help them on that journey effectively.
Susanne, anything to add?
Nothing to add.
We shall move on then. Thank you. Okay, there are another selection of questions here that are all referencing agile and safe, but I'll pick one. How do you feel about team topologies being subsumed within SAFe, as many of its core scaling concepts, especially agile release trains of 50 to 125 people, this person is very specific, don't align with team topology's core concepts?
I have to answer that. So yeah, it's whenever something comes dogmatic, it's really I'm reluctant to address this. So and whenever you have a framework and to follow, you have to follow this step and this step and this step, is something that it's you barely can adopt in organization, no matter if you're small or large organizations. And I guess the team topologies should give you some guidelines, but not like in this really dogmatic and prescribed version or approach like SAFe tries to press in everything, that this is the way in order to save your world. And in fact, it's like every context is different, and you have to combine different perspectives. So yeah, it's I would like to know what is your reaction when you saw that you got incorporated.
So I got a few responses to that. The first one is it's actually a rite of passage for people who come up with vaguely interesting ideas to be incorporated into scaled agile SAFe. It's like a sort of like a stamp of approval or something. So there's a certain kind of that's happened there. It must be big enough to be interesting to the SAFe people who make their money from grabbing other people's intellectual property and stuffing it into their framework, which is true. So this is exactly the modus operandi. They look for stuff that doesn't have IP protection and they bring it in, and whatever, fine. There was no interaction with us, as in the team topologies people, before that happened. So we've not sold anything. We've not had any useful working together, collaboration on that at all. So, but anyone is free to do that. Anyone is free to take the book the book ideas, incorporate it in whatever you like, and misrepresent it in any way you see fit.
You're making a bit nervous about the talk I've just given, but
Your talk was really, really good, and very accurate. But there's a slightly separate thing, which is that that SAFe is. Let me say something. I'm going to say something, and then we're going to pause, and then continue, and then complete the sentence. SAFe is actually very good at what it's designed for, and what it's designed for is to produce large-scale, complicated systems that are coherent at a single point in time. And it's very good at that. And if you look at the examples that they give, it's submarines, power stations, satellites. These are all complicated systems which are almost entirely disconnected from the rest of the world. Like submarines in the bottom of the ocean, you are not going to be able to communicate with it. You don't want to communicate. That's the whole point. It's got the nuclear arsenal, right? No one should be able to find it. And you want that thing to work in isolation with a great degree of coherence. So I'm not advocating for SAFe in general, but I mean, there are cases where something like that approach might be really, really good. But if we're talking about modern business systems that are connected to multiple other services, SAFe is the very last thing you should use, because we need to use ways of working that enable small parts of these systems to be updated on a daily basis. And if you've got a system like SAFe, which encourages whole system testing and then release, it's completely the wrong thing to use. So it's probably good in a context. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's good in a context. But for modern business systems which need to be updated at a small, fine-grained level, it's completely the wrong mentality. Which might surprise you for me to say it's probably a good thing in a context. I don't necessarily hate it or dislike it, but I mean, there's approaches to using IP which are better, but I think SAFe is one of these approaches that still sees this activity as a machine. They're building very, very, very complicated machines, and Teams Technology sits outside of that, alongside other approaches. Teams Technology is not unique, but original kind of Agile Manifesto stuff, that was also thinking about more ecosystems and empowered teams and things. And so Teams Technology and similar things sit outside of that, and we're really more about ecosystems. That's what I'll say publicly about that.
Well, you're getting laughter, so not a bad answer. Okay, we're going to take this back a little bit and look towards the future, but I'd also like to hear a little bit about, since the book has come out, it's been a few years, I think it was published in 2019, has anything evolved or changed, or have you learnt anything that's not in the book you would like to share?
Yeah, well, so first of all, I used to be a startup CTO back then, and I wished that the book were coming out sooner, because at that point I was really struggling with like small teams, and what in specifics to small teams. So I got a lot of questions like, how do I apply it to in the startup context when we don't have a massive, large team? And I guess that was something that I would say, like, how to start small in a small ecosystem, in a small organization. Is it more task forces that you build, or if you don't have like up to from 30 people on? So when you only have 10 people and you are only maximum 2 teams, but you also have to build MVP, or you have to build your product, and you have an infrastructure, and how do you share this knowledge, and how to speed and create a minimal viable product. So that's something I would say, how to start in a small context, and to apply that, what I would see as a complementing perspective from a startup perspective.
I think there's 2 things. One is, like I mentioned in my talk this morning, we think there's probably actually only 3 types of team, but then there's like a grouping of teams, and what we called platform in the book is probably more like a platform grouping. But it's probably valuable to think about other groupings as well. It's not a release train, but another kind of collection of things that sit together. I think that's probably, well, we're sort of talking about it, the core Teams Technologies group We've been talking about that for a while, and we'll probably put something out there soon around this idea of regrouping, but we're a little bit hesitant to rush in. We want to kind of sense it first, really. The second thing is that actually we should have written the book backwards, because what we find is that we'll get a CEO who comes along, reads the first 2 parts of the book, like Conway's Law and this and that, and then the team types goes, all right, let's do this. And we ran an engagement with a large retailer in North America, more than a year ago, like 18 months ago. The CEO had told all of his team, right, read the book, give me a plan for how you're going to do team topologies. And this person literally thought it would take about 3 weeks. Right, we just need to rename the teams, identify the teams we've done. Right, yep. And I thought he was joking at first, and then actually the penny dropped, and he was being totally serious. And he hadn't read part 3. So actually, at the very least now, I started to suggest to people read part 3 first, and then kind of then fill in the details from part 2 and part 1. So I don't know. There's a bit of a gap there in terms of the fact that people can miss some really important stuff from about evolution and the team interaction modes, which are all in part 3.
So you've said that you didn't want to dive into this too soon, but there is actually a question regarding platform groups, so I'm going to force your hand. Can you say more about the change from platform teams to platform groups? Why the change, and what difference does it make to think of it like that?
So it's actually not a change, because I found a Slack message in our old Slack from 2018 where I was like, Manuel, I think we should do something like platform group instead, because it's not the same thing, is it? And then we forgot about it basically as we were writing it. So it's actually not a change. But and in the book, I can't remember which chapter it's in, but you'll see a diagram, maybe more than one diagram, where it shows teams inside the blue box. So it's in there, but we didn't emphasize it enough, I guess. And particularly when in the diagram it says team, streamlined team, enabling team, complicated systems team, platform team. It looks like it's the same kind of thing, but what we've realized is only at the smaller scale, like a startup scale, would you have a single platform team. At all other scales, you'd have a platform kind of container and other types of teams sitting in there. So is it a change? Is it not? The change would be that we'd emphasize it more. And that's what we'll be doing, is to emphasize that. Emphasize the fact that a platform really is a container for other types of teams. It's a fractal thing, fractal kind of self-similar. You zoom in, you zoom out, it looks the same at different levels of the organization.
Okay, I'm going to abuse my position as interviewer and ask one of my own questions. Sorry. Susanne, you have a book coming out. Can you tell us a little bit more about your new book, please?
I guess I was thinking that you asked me when it's going to be published. No, just kidding.
No, the content, not the published
The
date.
content. So yeah, it's about, like, if you've seen the keynote this morning, it's about combining the 3 perspectives of water mapping, domain-driven design, and team topologies to build adaptive socio-technical systems. And it's about building on top of other shoulders, other giants, other books that have been established. And for me, it's like when I started in my career, it was like that when I started, it was just only one perspective. But when over the time, it was more like, no, it's not only technical solutions, also socio-technical systems that we have to build. And it's not only, sometimes when I ask with my team members, so do you know who our users are and what their users' needs are? And they said, no, we are just solving this problem here. So, and you told me to solve it. I said, no, this was not the idea. So we have to also to bridge the gap towards the business strategy. So what is our competitive advantage? Where should we invest the most strategic investment in the development effort into those parts that provide competitive advantage? So then I was thinking we have to have a more holistic view on this, and that's how it organically evolved over the time, combining these 3 perspectives to build adaptive socio-technical systems.
And as a follow-up, when is it being released? Do we know?
Yeah, I announced it last year already, and without knowing that it was ready for pre-ordering, and I didn't know. So there's no coordination with the publisher at all. So they just so the answer to that one, I plan to have it published this year, but I can't 100% promise, because there's a whole chain of editors following me, and developer editors, copy editors, production editors, and I'm illustrating all my illustration in my book as well. So there's roughly 100 illustrations in front of me. So, but yeah, so I hope.
Well, we're all very excited, and I'm sure people here will be purchasing it. Okay, I'm going to pick a question now that's a little bit deeper. We've been quite high level. Do you have any suggestions for how to organize systems that span multiple value streams? Do you embed resources in value stream teams or complex subsystems?
Well, I wouldn't do either. I'll be looking at why there's something that's spanning the value streams and start to question, is there actually a need for that? Or is that existing complexity? Is there a way to decouple those first? But the thing that in team topologies that sort of spans a value stream, if you can see it like that, is the platform. I don't like the word platform, actually. It's too overloaded. Like, if anyone can suggest something else, we actually, this is an aside. We tried flow enhancing, team cognitive load reducing entity or something. It looks horrible. So that thing, what we'll call it platform for now, is effectively spanning it. It's sitting underneath, right? It's sitting across there, or maybe multiple platforms with a greater degree of speciality. But listening, trying to understand how these value streams relate, and crucially, avoiding coupling flow in time is really important. We might have separate streams. Imagine if these were literally streams, water flowing downhill. Imagine putting a boat in one stream, a boat in the other stream, a boat in another stream. And imagine then trying to couple these together in time so that you got value all together at the same time. Then what have you got? You've got a massive piece of metal or wood that is literally attached to each of the boats that are on separate streams. That's quite difficult to achieve. But that's what organizations try to do when they couple together things in time. And instead, what we can do is set these boats off at different speeds, and eventually the first one will arrive, then the second one will arrive, and then we get some more value. The third one will arrive, we get a bit more value, and the fourth one arrives, and we got more value there. If we can set up the context so that these different boats are aware of the combined value, but we don't couple them in time, that is a better approach to scaling and getting value out. But you'll definitely hear people say, oh, we need to be able to manage this stuff together. And again, that's the mechanistic thing of people being able to predict and control all aspects of what's happening in this kind of environment. So yeah, that's actually one thing that's missing from team topologies, because we hadn't seen it at that time, is the coupling in time. Coupling in time is actually a bigger problem than a lot of the stuff that's being talked about today. And there are organizations that have solved that, but very few organizations that are aware even of having solved that kind of coupling in time problem. Amazon Web Services being one of them. So yeah, my starting point would be to look at, is that coupling across value streams actually really, 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 really needed?
Susanne, or shall I move on?
Yeah, I would say, so why are the value stream are coupled? I would try to assess those situations. Maybe could it be that they are wrong seams that in your organization or in your systems, or not wrong, but not optimal seams, I would say. And I would try to focus on, to find maybe different seams around it, like maybe more domain focused, like where, as I said earlier, domain focused, or where related behavior sits together. So when you make a change to that behavior, that you have to change it only at one place. And so maybe to assess your current value streams in terms of how can we reorganize them, maybe we could identify bounded context from domain-driven design, for example, grouping related behavior together. So when this behavior will change, then you have to change it only at one place. So that I would assess that situation in regards, like, are the seams optimal for functional changes, something like that.
Okay, I think we only have a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to try and pick a good one. Give me a moment. Okay, I think this is a nice rounded one to finish off with. What are the key principles behind team topologies and fast flow more generally?
Okay.
You can, yeah.
So starting principle, starting principle behind team topologies is that we want a fast flow of change, and that's multiple flows of change. It's not just one big block of change, it's multiple separate streams. But we can't just be pushing things to production. We need to get rapid feedback from those running systems. So we need to make sure that there's the groups of people who are building and running those services get rapid feedback from the live systems too. So that means we can't have any handoffs. We do need to think about team cognitive load. We can't just keep piling stuff into teams and giving teams more and more and more to be responsible for, because they will slow down, because they won't be able to understand it. Thankfully, I really do believe that. Thankfully, we've got limited capacity and working memory. Otherwise, it'd be a horrible experience being a human being. And we should take account of that human aspect as well. We've got principles around constraints on types of team and the behaviors that we expect to see from those teams, and then constraints on the types of interaction between those teams. And those are in the 3+1 team types, and 3 team interaction modes. I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff that emerges out of those, but those are the key aspects. And crucially, I guess another unwritten aspect is that we are not trying to specify everything. We're not trying to specify all the roles. We're not trying to have 10, 15, 20, 100 different types of job role in this kind of organization. We're not trying to specify it. We try to find the minimal set of kind of constraints, if you like, or principles that would allow behavior to emerge. So that's in itself, I guess, a principle.
We have 1 minute up to go. So Susanne, please, your final comments in the final minute.
Final general comments?
On that topic, yes, please.
Oh, it's okay. I was thinking just like... No, also, like, I don't know if you've mentioned, like, so to consider or mind blocking dependencies and communication and coordination efforts is another key principles that I would say. So, for example, usually it says, like, we have to collaborate a lot, and collaboration, as we have learned from previous talks already, is very expensive, and so only have collaboration where it makes sense. So, for example, for exploring, or where you're in a discovery mode together with another team, for example, exploring new technologies together, for example. So that is also one of the principles that I would add to that one.
And I think the thing that relates to your work is that architecture for flow, there's a certain kind of architecture, it's kind of system architecture, if you like, or software architecture for flow, which is actually quite specific. The architecture almost emerges out of the way in which we need to think about teams and boundaries and stuff like this, right?
Exactly. So it's that the one complements the other, right? So, for example, the bounded context grouping related behavior together, they are also serving very well as team ownership boundaries, and they are help to find suitable team boundaries, for example, then for streamlined teams. So they go hand in hand, and so it evolves over the time. So when you start with one, you don't have to start to know every aspect in very detail. You can start small and iterative with different approaches in a very iterative way.
We are at time. Please give a hand to our 2 keynote speakers.